Mindy, intermittent fasting is a term that's thrown around a lot in the health and wellness space these days. It's gained a lot of momentum, but for people who are tuning in, who are on the fence, maybe they've heard of the term, they've thought about diving in. Let's get into some of the benefits to maybe give them that nudge they need to embrace this practice.
The first thing I'm thinking is, why are people on the fence? Come on now. I have a lot of excitement about what intermittent fasting in general can do for the human body. So my first thought really was like, people are on the fence? Everybody should be embracing this. So if you are on the fence, let me take you off the fence. I think the easiest way to look at this is to understand that fasting is in our human design. We literally thrive with fasting. And if you go back to the caveman days, the cavewoman days, and you think about what happened in that moment, we didn't have a refrigerator. We didn't have a pantry. They didn't wake up in the morning and come out of the cave and be able to DoorDash coffee and breakfast to them. They had to go search for food. And a part of that ability to go search for food and have the mental clarity and the energy to be able to search for food, we had to dip into an alternate fuel source. And this alternate fuel source is called the ketogenic energy system. I like to call it the fat burner system, but basically when you go without food, you start to switch over into this fat burning place and you make a substrate called ketones. And it is in that initial production of ketones that supercharges your brain, speeds up healing, has you burning fat like you've never seen before, will fuel the mitochondria of every cell in your body because you were primally designed to be able to go be stronger so that you can go hunt for food in the absence of food. So it is literally in our makeup. And when we're not fasting, we're not tapping into this incredible design that we come equipped with.
All right. Well, I think you've convinced at least a few people there. Let's talk about how long it takes of being fasted to get to that point where you become basically superhuman, like you talked about there.
Yeah. So this was a big debate when I wrote Fast Like a Girl, the editor that I was working with. We went back and forth on when do people go into the fasted state. And I'll tell you what the literature says, and then I'll tell you what I've seen in our community of hundreds of thousands of people. So you have to remember that when you're eating, you're operating from your sugar burner energy system, or we can call that glucose if you want to look at it in a more scientific level. You need glucose to start to come down and then dip even below your meal amount in order for you to switch over into fat burning. So it takes about 8 hours is what the literature is saying for us to start to see that glucose has come down enough after a meal to start to move you into fat burning. So you're looking at about an 8-hour time period. But that isn't really where the magic starts. At 8 hours, you're now over into fat burning. If you stay in that fasted state going into 12 hours, 13 hours, now we got the supercharged factors kicking in. We are going to see testosterone go up and growth hormones go up. And all of a sudden, your body starts to go into that superhuman state, usually after 12 hours. So 8 will get you there. 12 will start the supercharge moment.
Well, let's really get into the details here. We got 8, we're getting into the supercharged. Let's push it further all the way to the extreme where it becomes unhealthy. I want to talk about the full continuum and what are some of the changes that happen in the body at these different phases.
Yeah, it's a great question. So here's the best way I can explain it. In the book, I lay out 6 different fasts, and they're all based off time. So intermittent fasting, most people know it as 12 to 16 hours in that range somewhere. We know that autophagy starts to kick in somewhere around 17 hours. The autophagy button will be turned on, and the body starts to get rid of old cells and repair the inner workings of the cells that are salvageable. We know at 24 hours, we start to see stem cells that kick in and repair the gut. 36 hours, the body goes into this really accelerated fat burning state. 48 hours, we get the whole dopamine system gets reset. You get new dopamine receptors that are born. And Walter Longo taught us that 72 hours, you could reboot your whole immune system. So with that as a template, as a graph, what we can now say is which one of these fasts is best for me. Because this is a big part of Fast Like a Girl, is that there's, what might work for one person doesn't work for another person. You've got to decide what your intention is with fasting. And I think one of the biggest challenges we've seen in the fasting movement is everybody just dipped in and stopped eating food, started, powering up on bulletproof coffee. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And they just kept going, not looking at setting a very specific intention to the length of their fast. So when I answer where does it go wrong, it goes wrong in a couple of places. One, when we do the same fast over and over again. The classic example of this is 1 meal a day. Jason Fung ignited the 1 meal a dayers, and it's amazing. And we're so grateful for his work, but you got to vary your fast. You shouldn't be doing 1 meal a day all the time. The other place it goes wrong is in women, which is why I wrote a whole book on it, because women, there are times for a woman's hormones where she should be fasting. There's times where she shouldn't be fasting. And then I would say the last place that I see it go wrong, or where we really need some assistance, is if anybody's got some eating disorders, they need to be really coached through that process. This is not something that you want to enter into lightly. Pregnant women should not be fasting. Nursing women should be fasting only to a certain level. These are all things that I map out in Fast Like a Girl.
Yeah, it's a great framework for us to build the rest of this conversation. And you mentioned something there that really hit home for me as I was reading your book. I've been into intermittent fasting for a long period of time now, but basically do the same fast most days, where I stop eating after dinner and then usually around lunch, I'll break that fast. So I'm doing whatever that would be. It varies day to day, but that's the general trend. Yes. And what I want to get into here, and I'm excited about for myself and for the listeners, which isn't often talked about as much, is the fact that you can, again, for the right person at the right time, push it beyond that and gain these other benefits from doing some longer fasts. Yeah. So what I want to talk about first, you mentioned autophagy there. Talk about when that kicks in and what that looks like.
Yeah. Oh God. Do you have 10 hours? This is a highly debated topic on all my socials, because the research that I've seen is usually around 17 hours. Think of autophagy as a dimmer switch. So you start to turn the autophagy light on. It starts around 17 hours. And it will peak at 72 hours. So somewhere between 17 and 72 hours, you have triggered autophagy. Now, autophagy, the best way to look at it is it's like you turn on an intelligence inside the cell. And that intelligence looks around the cell and says, okay, we've got some toxins inside this cell. We've got some bacteria and viruses inside this cell. We've got some cellular parts that aren't working well, and no food or nutrients are coming into the cell. So we better clean up our act. So that cell starts to repair itself. Now, in that moment, what the cell might decide is, wait a second, this cell is so bad that we need to kill it. It's a process called apoptosis. We need to get rid of it so it doesn't go rogue and form more disease. Remember that the whole premise of your body is it's built for survival. So when you stimulate autophagy, the survival instinct of the cells kicks in. And if there are cells that are going to hold back survival, they're going to get rid of them. If there are parts that need to be repaired, the intelligence is going to repair it. And this, to me, is the most beautiful part of fasting, is you can access this repair without spending a dime. Doesn't take any money. It is truly a gift that your intelligence has for you if you're willing to go into those longer hours.
And you mentioned there's 17 hours being how long we need to fast to get to that point. Roughly, it's a dimmer switch, which is a great analogy. But for somebody who hasn't fasted to that point, which is probably a lot of people tuning into the show, Is there other ways of getting there? Because obviously this sounds like something we all need and want to, clean up dead cells and parts within cells. Are there other things people might be doing outside of fasting that has a similar effect?
Oh, for autophagy, to stimulate
Yes.
autophagy? Oh, yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. Autophagy has become this kind of buzzword, and I love it. It's exciting that people are grabbing it. There are a lot of ways. Red light stimulates autophagy. Cold plunges are stimulating autophagy. HIIT workouts stimulate autophagy. You were already stimulating autophagy when you sleep every night. The autophagy gets stimulated. All of these are great. We have supplement and nutrients that can stimulate autophagy. I get a lot of people ask me about spermidine and nutrients like that. They're all great. But the greatest autophagy stimulator is fasting. So those can all be wonderful, and fasting is really number one for stimulating autophagy.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
So if you want to lose weight, I really feel like the first thing we've got to look at is when you eat, not what you eat. Coffee may really help one person elongate their fast, and it may actually break the fast for another.